Welcome back to Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel on 9 PBS. Clarity, understanding, and empathy. Common values for those on the front lines charting a bold way forward for African Americans in St. Louis. Stay tuned as we talk to these changemakers, visionaries, and overcomers. I'll ask the questions you want to hear and get the clarity we all need about the issues we face. That's next on Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel on 9 PBS. Coming up next on Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel, it may seem hard to believe given a dismal 25% voter turnout in the race for mayor in St. Louis, but the Gateway City has been on the forefront of voter engagement and protecting voter rights. Jett Thomas joins us to discuss the evolution of the fight for the right to vote and his book, Guardians of the Vote: History, Heroes, and the Legacy of Voting Rights. That's next on Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel on 9 PBS.
Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel is supported in part by Midwest Bank Center, the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation, and Orvin and Latrice Kimbrough.
Welcome back to another episode of Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel right here on 9 PBS. Thank you so much for joining us. Do you love our new set? I am loving it, in part because it meant shopping. Had to do some furniture shopping, and I was up for the challenge, let me tell you. Thank you for joining us for season 2 of Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel. But some things remain the same. We still need you to subscribe, to share this video. Click on that little bell on YouTube so you'll be alerted when new podcasts drop. We would love to read your comments, what you think of each conversation that we have, and like the post indeed, okay? So you've got your homework. We haven't even started this conversation yet, and I'm already giving you homework. So subscribe, share, like, and you can even download. A lot of people do that, download and watch it later. And I know the conversation is going to be a good 45 minutes or so, but break it up. Listen to 20 minutes on your drive home. Listen to another section while you're making dinner or just chilling at home. You don't have to listen to the whole thing in one sitting. So that's what a lot of people do to make sure that they do listen to it all. You don't have to listen to it all at one time. But we thank you for however you consume this podcast. We thank you so much for being a part of this journey here at 9 PBS. Well, we have what a great book, what a great conversation for you today. It is both historic and it is very timely for what we are facing today when it comes to voting. The book is called Guardians of the Vote: History, Heroes, and the Legacy of Voting Rights, the 1960s versus today. And the foreword was written by one Tavis Smiley, yes, who I have interviewed before and who is a very well-spoken person with a lot of points of view. And the author of this book joins us in studio, John Thomas. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad we worked this out. So the book again, Guardians of the Vote. So the first question is who and why, what makes for a guardian of the vote in your mind in writing this book?
I think we all could be guardians of the vote. Right. Guardians of the vote are the people that understand the preciousness of the right to vote. They protect it, they advocate for it, they educate for it. And then you have those people like Tavis Smiley that are multipliers, that go out and increase the opportunity for people to go out and vote.
You broke the book down. I mean, every book has chapters, right? But your chapters are based on how voting was suppressed, if you will. Discrimination in communication, scare tactics and intimidation, restricting actual voters, and another one is dubious political games. Why did you break it down in that way?
Well, I think we were given the right to vote.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there were some people probably at that time that thought, okay, it's over. And things are never over in our country. There's always a relitigation or a retelling of history. And it just seemed to be the natural breaking points for you get the right to vote, people try to marginalize, take it away, decrease it. And depending on whoever's in office, it is sometimes something that people look at, they can manipulate. So I just thought those breakdowns made sense and they kind of followed the path of the African Americans in America.
So we'll jump around a little bit because scare tactics and intimidation, one of the guardians is a present day individual. So what were the scare tactics and intimidation in the 60s? And we should all be familiar if you know any of your history at all.
they run the gamut.
Yeah.
From intimidation, losing your home, your jobs, losing friendships, sometimes even losing your life. There were things that were done to people that were just really, really cruel. From just standing up and taking a look at people when you come to vote. You know, you have poll watchers that were there. And we do understand you have to have a secure vote. You have to have some integrity in your vote. But having people there for some nefarious reasons really can be intimidating for people who aren't fully understanding of their rights and understanding that there are people who, good, bad, or indifferent, want to decrease some of the voices in some communities.
And I did not know until I read Joy Reid's book about, it's called Medgar and Murley, about Medgar Evers, his assassination, that when they were trying to register voters in Mississippi, that there were those who would record the license plates of those
Absolutely.
who went to meetings and then determine who they were. And then the local banker would pull the note on their house. Describe that.
What does that say? When you go and exercise your right to vote and you're doing what you think is fair and being a good citizen, because we all want to be good citizens, and you have someone who's kind of watching you. You know, there are times when folks of color, black or brown, whoever it happens to be, if there's a car that pulls up behind you, if it was a police car, and it just kind of makes you tense up for a second. And if you're trying to vote at a time when voting has been suppressed or people have lost their jobs, and then you can put two and two together and realize, am I being called in about my loan because I voted?
Because I registered to vote.
Because I registered to vote.
Because I registered.
And that it has a multiplying effect. It has the unintended consequence of not only do I worry about voting, but do I now not take my children to vote? You know, my parents took me to vote whenever they voted for anything, no matter what it was, dog catcher they went. I took my children with my wife to vote. And if those things had happened back then and some people weren't courageous enough or guardians of the vote to realize we're going to push through this. You can't take this away. We're not going to allow you to intimidate us. That can silence votes for generations.
And I recall in that same era that there were black teachers who would be fired. And so it did have a chilling effect. You're telling me that if I register to vote, I'm going to lose my house and or my job. Those real tactics were happening in our lifetime.
Oh, absolutely. It's my mother passed a couple years ago. She was born in 1935. My father was born in my sister and I get this confused. It's 1917, 1919. He was an older man. They lived a time where you didn't vote.
Right.
Voting was so scarce and sacred that coming from the South, you didn't want to risk it. You barely had enough to have two nickels to rub together. And then knowing that someone would actually apply pressure to you to make sure that you didn't vote, to intimidate you and your family, to call in a loan, or to threaten a sharecropper or a farmer, that if you exercise this right that's given to you by the Constitution,
Right.
not protected, given to you by the Constitution, that you could lose far more than just the right to vote.
Including your life, as you pointed out.
Absolutely.
And to be clear, this is not some rebel rousers. That tells you how old I am. Even using that phrase.
I'm familiar.
This is not just a gang of angry whites in the South. This was government-sponsored, legislated efforts to use scare tactics to stop black people from not only registering but from actually voting.
Absolutely. I was a history teacher, and there's a famous cartoon, I forget the name of it, but it shows every immigrant that comes to America having to go through some heck to get the right to vote. The majority of those people could kind of assimilate into our country. We're one of the few blacks and the browns that really, it's kind of hard for the skin to fade away. And to lose that ability to kind of assimilate and get in and just vote is taxing. The voting time for us, black and brown folks, brings a level of stress that a lot of people don't get.
Right.
You know, where are you voting? How far do you have to go to vote? Have they closed down some of the voting polls?
Which happened
Constantly.
today. Right.
Constantly. Are they eliminating the idea that you can't even simply give some folks water if they're standing in line? Making those things illegal, once again, adds another level of pressure to people who really need that vote. But folks are saying, you know what? We want to manage your votes. We want to manage what comes out of your community.
And we're still in the chapter on discrimination, or rather scare tactics and intimidation in the book Guardians of the Vote. And I mentioned Crystal Mason. You describe her as a guardian of the vote. She went to prison. This is a current day story.
Yes, ma'am.
Your book chronicles, again, from the 60s to today. Crystal Mason went to prison. There's always been, before you describe for us why she went to prison and where she is today, but there's always been the terminology of voter fraud, right? That phrase is being used. There is voter fraud. It's not to the level, by the numbers, that some would have us to believe. And in the last, I would say, 2 years, the majority of voter fraud cases proven were from one political party versus the other.
Yes, ma'am.
But tell us what Crystal Mason did to land her in prison.
We need integrity in our voting systems, and everybody wants that. Voter fraud's very small. It's a very small percentage. Crystal had come out of prison, if I remember correctly, and was on supervised parole and voted. And that happens to so many people that are black and brown and white across our country. And when she voted, long story short, that violated the law, and she got the consequences for doing that. It is one of those things that just really is a nuance. You have to know and be aware of your voting status.
Right.
If you've been purged, what do you do? How do you appeal? What do you do? Where do you go? And having those things and not having those things, she just wanted to vote. She just wanted to exercise her right.
And was she not told that she could vote?
Correct. She was not. So she paid the price for it.
And did she serve that whole 5 years, or?
Majority of it.
Yeah. But she was told that she could vote, and I can't remember who informed her of that. But it was an arm of the government that told her she could, in fact, vote.
If they tell you that, you assume you can.
Right. Okay. And so the other chapter, I mean, they're all. I haven't read the entire book, but I'm taking this on vacation with me.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Because I mean, I being informed is better than being entertained.
Yes, ma'am.
And so how about that for a Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel tagline? Being informed is better than being entertained. But we are entertaining, let me tell you. Restricting actual voters, talk about what was going on, what barriers were put in place, poll taxes, scare tactics. You've talked about all of this, but talk about some of the other barriers that were put in place.
I think one of the things that's probably the most troublesome for me is you expect to be able to vote, and my parents took me to vote at our neighborhood schools. It was close. We could have walked there if it was necessary. Closing polling locations for people that are in black and brown communities or underserved communities, if you knew that you could get to your school, which is probably 10, 15 minutes away, that's easy to do. And if you have a job that doesn't allow you that much time off to go vote, closing places and centralizing locations for people to go vote is a thing that I think is horrible. For my community and the people that I know and my contemporaries right now, we can get in the car and drive 20 minutes, 30 minutes. It's not a problem. We can go early, we can go late. The fact that you can now take these people who may be relying on public transit, who may be relying on unreliable transportation, and telling them that what used to be 10, 15 minutes from your house is now 30 minutes from your house. Well, if you can't get time off, or you can't afford to get time off, that's a troublesome thing.
That's a barrier. That's a barrier. What's the rationale for closing so many polling places? And is it that more polling places are closed in poor communities, in black and brown communities, than in, say, suburbia?
Well, I think it's a little kind of both or. If they close them in suburbia, by its very nature, you have better transportation. You can connect better. In those other places, I think it's an opportunity for some folks to manage that vote. I think we all have expectations. We have an analysis that we look at. Okay, if I get X percentage of vote in this area, X percent of that vote. But if I can limit the vote that you would get in a certain area, perhaps that gives me a better chance to win that office. Unfortunately, I think a lot of folks, when they get elected, their first thought is, how do I become reelected? And if I can manage certain areas, I think that is something that they do take into account.
And this is a chapter, all of them, where you talk about what was going on in the 60s and then bring us to today. And I do want to talk about Charles Homeyer, correct, and why he is a guardian of the vote. What a great story, and hang on to that smile. But today, when we talk about restricting the actual vote, voter ID, which has been an issue debated for decades, right? And then early voting and absentee voting, the changes in those. Why are those barriers? And they're barriers today.
They're making it so hard to do. Whether it be a college student who's away, if you have to show up with your ID, if you have to show up with your birth certificate. I heard yesterday that there was a movement to have you either have a passport or a birth certificate to vote. I think that what we're seeing is a real concerted effort to finer point some of those things that took place in the 50s, 60s, and 70s that worked, but to be a little bit more, I hate to say the word dubious, but dubious about it. Whether that means that you have to justify why you're not voting, if you have to have certain identification to show why you couldn't vote. It continues to be a place where it's either it's into gerrymandering, either cracking or packing in votes to marginalize and to limit the voices of people.
And what do you say to those who say, what is wrong with requiring an ID, and why don't you, those of you on the other side, not that you're picking a side, but those of you on the other side who say, no, we shouldn't require a voter ID, help people get an ID, some sort of identification? A, what's wrong with requiring that? And then B, why not help people, which is happening, help people to get some sort of identification?
I think, once again, what I said earlier, it's the both or. We
Right.
should have an idea. But I don't think we need to be going so far past that. And also we need to understand, if we're saying getting ID, look at some of our communities. Look at where the ability to go into a DMV or to a government agency to get an ID, are they in those areas? Or are they not, where people have to get in and live with limited income and limited funds and get on a bus and go 30 minutes away, 40 minutes away, wait in line and go? Our elections are, by and large, very, very safe and very, very secure. And you've seen that in the last couple of elections that have taken place.
And I went to get a was I getting a driver's license or no, we bought a new car, and so I had to get the tags, and I went to the DMV in East St. Louis on the way to work, and the parking is great, so that's where I go, and it was closed.
See, that's telling.
And I had no idea that it was closed, and I don't know. So now those people are, I guess you have to go to
Now, where do they
Belleville.
go? Yeah.
So let's talk about Charles. Charles Homeyer is a guardian of the vote,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
Charles says you're quoting him in your book that it was the summer of '63. He was a sophomore in college when he first heard Dr. King's "I Have a Dream" speech. He describes himself as white, privileged, conservative, insulated from the world, and he had just gone inside when he caught sight of Dr. King on television. And then I'm skipping forward. Never had I heard such passionate, image-filled preaching, and that changed his life, and he put feet into action.
Absolutely.
What did he do?
Charles Homeyer is the father of my wife, and he has had some transformational things happen in his life. One of the things was hearing Dr. King. He adopted a biracial daughter and pledged his life with his wife to making sure that she had all the experiences that she could, but also realizing that he once again could be that person that could be a multiplier. He could have stayed. He could have written a check. He got on a bus and he drove down at risk to his own life, because there were times when people back then were dying.
Were killed.
Were killed for going down and doing what he did. But he thought it was so important that he went to do it. Charles daily looks to fight a battle for fairness, whether it be black people, brown people, immigrants, the downtrodden. Father Homeyer is that special person that not only influences the people around him, but influences the people who are around those people.
He was 21. They went to Alabama,
Just a
correct?
child. Just a child.
To
Yes,
help
ma'am.
register to vote, register black people to vote. And he was asked to speak for the group at a particular gathering that night. And he said, "We know there were outsiders who have no authority or lasting permanence here, no investment in the life of this community and the changes all of you seek for it, and that you will accomplish." Outsiders, lasting permanence. I've skipped a whole line.
That's fine.
No investment in the life of this community and the changes all of you seek for it, and that you will accomplish. But we are here with you for 1 week, and promise to work as hard as we can for that time registering new voters. And it's after that speech that he is approached by a black woman who asks him, does he have a girlfriend? I did not expect that when I was reading this heartfelt statement from Charles Homeyer.
You always got to be on the lookout for your children.
Yes.
You always got to be on the lookout. Charles is that other great example, I think, that makes America special. When you have allyship, when you have people who are white, black, different socioeconomic areas that come together for a common cause, for the common good, you can really accomplish some things. And I think that's really his gift, that he can slide in and talk to people. He can slide in and make people feel comfortable to share, to partner, to collaborate, to move forward, which is what he did back then. Yes, he went down for that week. Yes, he has always paid attention to that. Also, he did and has in his time put words and money behind those things. It's one thing to go. It's another thing. I had a wonderful principal years ago said, you can pretend to care, but you can't pretend to be there. He's been there, and he still is there.
When you were writing this book, because that's the purpose of it, is to look at how voting was impacted, the ability to vote, the desire to vote, the desire to register to vote, how government forces impacted black people's ability to register to vote and to then vote. But you've got one eye on history and one eye on headlines, and they are plentiful.
Very.
How did you decide? Because it seems every other headline is about. There are federal lawsuits right now,
Yes, ma'am.
in several states, North Carolina and South Carolina among them, over gerrymandering. So you had to say, you had to say, I can only, how many pages? I can only do 300 pages. I can't do 500 pages.
One of the things as a former teacher and a former educator is you're always trying to connect the past to the present and seeing how things move together. And I think when you understand the past and understand some of the motivations of people, and you can kind of see things and maybe sometimes project and hopefully put you in a place where you're not only educated, but you're prepared for it. One of the wonderful things about being a principal was my days were always different.
Right.
However, I could expect something from this realm, that realm, and that realm. Okay, I remember what that could be. I remember this could possibly be something. The present day is simply an evolution of what we've dealt with in the past. There are some things that come up where people think they're new, but they really do connect back to other things. So having such a love for history, where our people come from, where my parents have come from not having, my father had a 6th grade education, my mother graduated from high school, to having 3 children that all graduated with advanced degrees. My sister graduated from SLU right down the road. And understanding that you don't get there, nor do you appreciate getting there without understanding the history, but then also paying attention to what's happening now. How do we make sure that the table is set for our children? How do we make sure that the table is set for our allies? How do we connect, and what can we do to move this country forward?
Because there is a clear connection. We cannot disconnect
Very much so.
from our history, nor should we.
Very much
So
so.
how do you, as a history teacher, because you're once a history teacher, always a history teacher, you are retired, but how do you, as a history teacher, how have you in your mind handled or thought about the laws in place to limit the teaching of Black history?
It's troublesome. My high school was very good. It's a very highly ranked high school in the St. Louis area. But I didn't really get a lot of Black history until I got to college, and having the benefit of hanging around Black people who were not necessarily formally educated, but had lived through things.
Right.
Hearing them talk, hearing the family talk about things. Also understanding that it is up to me to educate myself, to educate my children, and the people that are around me that I can influence. What things are important? How do you flush out that picture? I used to always tell my students, I'm going to give you the skeleton, but it's up to you to kind of fill out the flesh and the bones, the muscle. And one of the things that we have to do as educators and as teachers and as parents and allies is to make sure that we are giving a complete story. It's very easy in this place right now to flip on the TV and get a 20-second to a 2-minute soundbite. And it will give you something that will either make you very angry or very dismayed.
Right.
But our job is to be an educated consumer, to go and find out whether it's social media or social media literacy, how we educate, what's the rest of that story? What are they leaving out? Most people hate political commercials. absolutely love them.
Why do you love them?
I love to see what they're saying, what they're trying to get me to do, what they're trying to get me to understand, but what are they also trying to make me forget, to lessen. So it's very sad for me after the election when all those commercials are gone.
You're the only one I know.
I might be. I might be. I might be.
I would observe that to say that it's troubling, and it is troubling, I also find it disingenuous, and there is a purpose behind it. Then there are those in elected office and others who want to put in a history education that is about America being American exceptionalism, really, is where we would like to go. Again, as a history teacher, we say no to Black history, but we say yes to America the Great. How do you, as a history teacher, handle that or react to that?
America is one of the greatest countries in the world.
Absolutely.
And I'm not sitting here and benefiting from all the things I have, but for America. I also understand my country's done a lot of bad things to people to get to where we are, whether it be manifest destiny, whatever it happens to be. But I also think it is our job, if we do our job properly, that we have created students who will leave our classrooms and they will question. They will understand that this is what I believe, but I'm also smart enough to understand I don't know everything. I'll get out in the world. I'll talk to my allies. I'll talk to people who I don't agree with and try to flesh out what I believe, get the fullest picture they possibly can to make decisions about what's going on in the world. Obviously, there are people out there that are trying to mislead in the best sense of the word or out and out lie to you. But I think our job is to make sure that when we ever make a decision, whether it be in the voting booth or whether it be on our personal lives, it's a really informed decision.
That sounds like critical thinking, which people are also not happy with.
Yes.
Or afraid with.
Yes.
Afraid about.
I'm not afraid of that. I think that's what we should do.
But give us a sense of, okay, so what, you just described it, but what is critical thinking and why is it problematic to some? And why do we need it?
I think, unfortunately, we've gotten to a place where changing your mind is a negative, is a bad thing. I always thought was taught and understood that the indicators of an intelligent person were the fact that they could be presented a problem, have a belief, study it, get more information, and then change their decision. Now that's looked at as flip-flopping, or you're being a weak need to make that decision. It's not the way it's supposed to be. You're supposed to look at it, and if the information that you receive, if the information you were told that you research changes your decision, that's the great decision that you're supposed to make. And why our country's gotten to that place? Because I think all individually, we're at that place. And okay, I'm sorry, my bad, as my kids would say, I made a mistake. But I think when we get to that collective where there's not that nuance, that back and forth, the TikTokification of our country, where you cannot have that conversation. I love my children to death, but sometimes a text isn't the way that we need to communicate. We need to have a conversation where you can hear my voice and my tone, and I can hear you say, oh, that's not what I meant. Okay, we can get to this place and make this decision.
Equally troubling to say we cannot teach our children critical thinking or should not teach our children critical thinking.
Everyone should have it.
Everyone should have that, period. So I do want to talk about your dedication, I should say, to my father for demonstrating how to live a life of faith-filled kindness, service, and generosity to others. There's a backstory there. Talk about that.
I've had two fathers. My biological father was in my life for 27 years, a black man raised in Widener, Arkansas, and led a life that was so hard. I have Charles Homeyer, the father that I married into, that I've had longer than I had my biological father, who really was such a gentle soul, but there's such steel in that gentleness that I'm going to stand up against my own race at a time when it was popular to down certain folks. And to have faith be at the center of both of those gentlemen is something that I strive to live to every day. I doubt I'm half the man of both of those men. And I would hope that my children can see, and the people who know me can see, that there is a desire to be better, a desire to want to make sure that I can leave this place with some impact, as those gentlemen did.
No, this book is true impact.
Thank you.
History is true impact. dubious political games in Chapter 4, gerrymandering. When I first became a talk show host, gerrymandering was one of those things that at the time I felt like it was boring to people to talk about. You'd put up this map and it didn't make any sense, and they were drawing lines that, and just from the callers, when I was doing talk radio, and this is in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, it really seemed boring to people. Either they didn't get it, they didn't care about it, what's the big deal? And then there was a sliver of people who were outraged and wanted to know more and did not understand why it was happening. It's been in our lives for decades.
Forever.
What was happening in the 60s, and is it very much different from what's happening today?
Not really at all. If you look at, it was when I educated and learned exactly what gerrymandering was. I was like, well,
And describe what it is, by the way.
so in a sense, it's where you take a geographic area and you take a Sharpie and you kind of run it in this most weird and absurd way to say this is a district. And it may not make any sense. It can cross city, county lines. It can be up, down, left, right, circular. But it doesn't really kind of make a lot of sense.
So instead of it being a rectangle or a
just
square,
a straight line or some squares.
It is a squiggly line.
It is. And there is no template to it that you see from Missouri to Illinois to Ohio to Michigan to North or South Carolina. It is an attempt to manage a certain block of people to vote.
Right.
And Democrats and Republicans have both done it. But it is one of those things where if you could just look at the map and say, we're going to just do these equal squares all over, that would make politicians from both sides have to acknowledge and work with and try to get the approval of all the people in that geographic area.
The voters that you have in the square.
The voters that you have,
Right.
not appealing to a certain group, to an ideology, but you'd have to be responsive to the people in your district, which is what we always want our politicians to do. If we gerrymander in such a way that this one particular area, they really only care about 3 or 4 things, you can manage that. You can, tip your hat to some of it, but you don't have to always be as impactful to them.
And gerrymandering done to create districts where you can then have black representation. Maybe some would say, well, that makes sense. Others didn't even like it then when it was done. And it is...
To a degree, and I understand why they did it. There was a time that we needed to make sure we had some representation, and that was a way to do that. But as we have moved out of areas, as we're not a monolith,
Right.
Black and brown have moved to different areas,
Right.
we still continue to see some of that stuff. And just the opposite of gerrymandering is the cracking, where they would take an area and dilute it to where the impact of those people who go to vote, if you take the hypothetically, Democrats and move them into a highly Republican area, well, they're not going to win. And you take their voices right then and you just shrink it down to where that larger majority doesn't have to be responsive to them. They can tip their hat, but they don't have to do anything for them.
And this is where you describe Tavis Smiley as a guardian of the vote.
Tavis is amazing. Anyone who's ever heard him, I was influenced by him on the Tom Jordan Morning Show,
Right.
where he would come on.
Back
and
in the day,
talk.
yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And he was on PBS, and he wrote books, The Covenant with America, and you realize, oh, we don't only have allies on the other side. We have allies here who are willing to go out, who can articulate the issue, who can motivate, connect, put us in connection with people who can get us to kind of do some things. And we needed that, good, bad, or indifferent. I think we need to look to leaders that we think have our best interests at heart, who trust us. I look at him people talk a lot about Carter G. Woodson in his book, The Miseducation of the Negro. Mm-hmm. He has a part where he says, if you teach a man that he's less, he always has to go around to the back door to get in, to the back door to get in. If there's no back door, he'll go around, he'll break his neck trying to create a back door. Mm. Tavis is that person who lets us know we've always had excellence. And I'm not afraid to stand up and be proud to lead and say, follow me, we can do this. And then standing on his shoulders and doing great things. I cannot say enough things. I was tickled pink when I was able to connect with him.
And you stuck by his side through the President Obama, the fallout.
Yeah.
where Tavis seemingly was calling out the president for not being more down with the cause
But he's
and
always
being more
said-
vocal
Yes.
in support of African Americans.
He's always said, these are our interests,
Yeah.
and we're going to fight for our interests. And I think that's honest, that's pure, that's who he is. And to go against and challenge folks who are in leadership, that tells you how much he believes it, to sacrifice some things. And he did sacrifice some things. But I think that tells you the level of commitment that a person has, where you're willing to say, okay, I know you thought I was going left, but I'm going to zig right for a little bit.
How did you, because most people would say today, I can't say that. That's not a true statement. There are those who would say today that, history, I don't know, I didn't have a good history teacher. I did have an excellent history teacher in middle school, not in high school, but in middle school. And I had a love of history because of her. But that was it. There was no other. So people find history to be kind of boring, sadly, but it's all around us. It's all around us.
I would like to think I was a good history teacher. Probably not the greatest for a lot of people when I was learning my craft.
How did you turn their eyes on? How did you open their minds?
When I thought I was doing it well, I connected it to the present day.
Okay.
I connected to me personally. Hey, you have a friend that does this. Well, okay, that's like this nation here. This nation does this. Just like your friend does it. And your friend sometimes you got to back them, and then next thing you know, you're in a fight, and that's a war. And then what do we do after that? One of the things I think that everyone does appreciate is history, and whether it clicks in the classroom or it clicks when you're 35, everyone has an appreciation for it. Whether it be social media, whether it be movies. Some of the greatest movies we've ever seen were historical movies.
Right, right.
And there's something about when you are ready to appreciate history, it's there. And then you can kind of latch on it. I talked about cornerstones, anchors in history. And you can anchor to Civil War. You can anchor to civil rights. You can anchor to World War I or World War II. You can anchor to, whatever it happens to be. And then kind of plot your way through. And then on a more personal level, okay, where do you anchor? Where's your family from?
Right.
How did you get here? Those are anchors that kind of allow you to kind of put your feet down and settle in what we used to talk about in class was fertile soil.
I have tried to encourage, I've told my sons their birth story. There's a birth story. Like, how old was I when I got pregnant? How did I meet your father? They know, and they're like, oh, please don't tell the story again, because I've told them many times. That's a part of their history. My parents met. Their father's from the Caribbean. He's from the Virgin Islands. So it's personal history to get you interested in history just beyond your life. And that's the way I've tried to connect them to make it more interesting to them. And the oldest is they're both readers, but the oldest is definitely a reader. So that's another aspect of great books to get kids interested in history, but starting with the personal story of you, the personal story of the year you were born. I love those things that you can give people. This is how much bread costs the year you were born. This is the major headline. That's history. That's history. I do love your chapter, what every individual can do. And what can we do now? What every individual can do now.
I think everyone needs to be invested in our country. Everyone needs to be invested in elections. Everyone needs to be invested in the education of that individual. If we don't understand what's going on currently in our area, if we're not educated about the things, obviously we have a couple of elections popping up here soon.
Right.
They impact things. They're your voice. If we don't vote, if we don't share, if we don't ask, sometimes communities lose things. If we don't make sure that as a region we are aware of the ramifications of not being involved. I'm a huge football player, a huge football fan. To see when the Rams left and what that did to the city.
Right.
Some people said
I did not burn my Rams jersey, by the way, because it cost too much money.
I kept it, but I haven't worn it since.
I haven't worn it since. It's hanging in my closet. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's one of those things that you have to do. I don't understand how a person could not be invested in, because those are the things that are going to make a difference for you and your children and your community. whether that be from a civic standpoint of making sure your roads are clear, or making sure you have the proper support and security from your local government, the trash getting picked up, being able to make a phone call and have people answer it in the government. I think our job is to educate ourselves. And we need to make sure that we are not someone that you can take advantage of as a community.
The challenge is if people don't feel that it belongs to them. This is my thought process about about calling on us to be invested. I mean, I own a home and I own cars, and I'm paying a lot of taxes into my school district. For instance, I look at that slip. How much did I pay to the library district? How much did I pay to the school district? I am invested in part because I'm a homeowner. That's what gets you. That's what can get people more invested. And in communities where there aren't a lot of homeowners, I feel like they believe that it doesn't belong. Nothing belongs to them. And so it's hard to say to them, invest.
I would challenge that a little bit.
Please do.
The freedoms that they have been paid for by blood.
That's a part of the story.
By people who have come before you, and to not maximize the ownership of whatever happens to be in your area. You have the freedom to do whatever you want, to go wherever you want. You can get on a bus if you don't have a car. You can go anywhere in the area. You can get on Metro and can go wherever you want. But to not appreciate that you stand on the shoulders of those people who sacrifice things and sometimes even gave their lives for you to have that ability to say, I choose not to vote, which I don't agree with, but you have that freedom to do it because people sacrificing to get you the opportunity.
And people shed blood and died for us to be able to invest in and be whatever we want to be. I absolutely agree with you. I'm just saying that it seems that people feel this is. Well, and let me say this, that I remember in the last election, CBS News, and I think it was Gayle King went out talking to potential voters, and she went into a bar, and I can't remember the city, I apologize, but there was a woman behind the bar. She was a bartender, and she said she was not going to vote, and her reason, and this is a common refrain, I think, her reason was, what have they done for me? And I thought, well, first of all, what taxes are coming out of your check? What do you have? Where are your kids? Are they in subsidized daycare, childcare, or not? You drove in a car on roads that are paved. I mean, it's just the fact that so many people think politicians aren't doing anything for me. There is a real disconnect that I'll use your word, that is troubling.
I think there's been a real concerted effort to kind of make people feel that.
Absolutely.
And if you don't understand that, not only what have they not done for them, but what could they have done for you? You know, look at the other side of that coin.
Oh, that's good.
If you could consider that, if you were to go to vote, you know, would you get something different? Would you not be standing behind this counter? Would your tips be different? There's a multitude of things that you have to consider that if you get involved that you could change. And sadly, I think, you know, there is some sacrifice.
Right.
There's some personal sacrifice for things. So my family and I, we often vote for things that may not be in our best interest, but it makes sense for the community. You know, and you talk about school taxes. Pay a lot of school taxes. I would not like to pay them, but I recognize and understand the importance of that for the community. My area has been very stable. Our school is very strong, but the reason for that is that the community has said, we get this collectively, and we're going to continue to do that. And I think that if you can get that person to understand whether you realize it or not, and I'd love to have a sit down with that person and say, here's why.
Right.
And going back to that statement earlier, if we can challenge their thought process, if we can get them to think that they will be a learned person and then change their opinion, I'm like, okay, now I get it. If we can change that person to become a voter, non-voter to become a voter, we've got somebody. And that's going to maximize that person's ability to influence people around them.
Yeah, and I feel like the book could be taught in class, but it wouldn't be taught in a class because of certain laws today governing what can be taught in a class. But this should be taught.
Thank you.
In a class. What is your overall message of Guardians of the Vote?
It was a great book. I'm going to butcher the title. And it was things that I should have learned in history class or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
School's not the end of education. It is the tipping point. It whets the palate. For you to get some exciting things that can resonate when you leave, you go to college, if you can go to college. If not, you know, to post-secondary opportunities. of work, the military, whatever it happens to be. But you continue to grow, you continue to learn. I would hope that people would pick that up at some point in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I would hope that they would pick up a newspaper. I would hope that they go to a library, a rally or something, or even something on the news or a TikTok or something. It's just, that challenged something I thought.
Mm-hmm.
And not just as a challenge me, I'm going to sit down and see if I can learn more about it. So I hope it's a tipping point for someone who can, it can nudge them to a place where they go in and, I'm going to learn a little bit more about this. And we're lucky that we have elections fairly frequently in America.
Absolutely.
That we could,
absolutely.
It would resonate with them.
Can I say that when I read the title, and even when we were trying to schedule you to come on the show, and my executive producer, Leah Gullett, sent me, how about this, right? Pitch this to me, if you will, that I instantly thought, I took it personally. I am a guardian of the vote.
Ma'am.
That's what I thought when I read the title. Without even knowing exactly what it was about before I got the book, I thought, okay, that's who I am. That's who we all are,
It is.
right?
And we should be. It's aspirational. Not only do we vote, we educate, we talk about it. We're guarding this legacy.
Right.
That, as I said, have been paid for by blood, by generations. We are.
My parents grew up in Jim Crow South, so I am
That's a familiar story.
I
It's
am
a familiar
definitely
story.
a guardian of the vote and standing on my parents' legacy and all that they went through. My father, 8th grade education. My mother graduated from high school. 5 kids. I have the least amount of education of my siblings. I do have a bachelor's, but they all are show-offs. The rest of them are show-offs with their advanced degrees. But we have that in common. We have that in common
It's a story.
with our parents. It is a joy to have you, and thank you for writing this book.
My pleasure. Thank you
It
for
is
having
called
me.
Guardians of the Vote. John Thomas joining us on Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel. Thank you so much for this work.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for joining us on Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel. Get this book. This is one the whole family needs to read. Because again, might not be taught in today's classroom because of the laws regarding the teaching of Black history, but this is history that we all need. And it affects all of us, not just Black and brown people, not just African Americans, but it affects all of us. And this is not just about, as you'll find out when you read the book, it's not just about Black people, because some of the guardians of the vote are, in fact, our allies who have helped us to secure the right to vote in this country and continue the fight today, because there is an ongoing battle of voting rights in this country today. So thank you again for joining us for another episode of Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel. Don't forget to subscribe, to share, to like, and please leave your comments about this great conversation. We so appreciate you for joining us. Have a great day. We'll be back with another episode of Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel on 9 PBS.
Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel is supported in part by Midwest Bank Center, the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation, and Orvin and Latrice Kimbrough.